Hey guys, today's demo is going to be about drawing a fruit. In this case, we have kind of like an orange, a halo. We're going to be drawing on black or using black and white charcoal on gray tone paper. So I just wanted to point out some of the terminology that we'll be referring to. Those 6 values, if you watched my subtractive charcoal video, we spoke about 6 values in terms of light logic. And I'm going to show you how they apply to the actual object that we're looking at. So if you're looking at this one right here, remember in this case, our light source would be coming from this side, okay? So it'll be coming from this side. This is gonna be the highlight. So what we're looking at on our actual item, do you see these little white areas here? Or I don't wanna call them white because they're not white, but the lightest, the shine, there, all these little areas here, those are the highlights. In this particular object, it's more of a glossy kind of object. So it's bouncing back that light. My light source is coming from this side of the room over here. But if you look at my hand, you'll see that I don't have that many, I don't want to say strong highlights, more so maybe over here. Your skin tends to absorb light, so you don't see that much of a highlight. You do see some of it down here though, but that's going to be the highlight. That's the area that's closest to the light. The highlight has to exist within the light mask. So this whole area here is the light mask. So if you squint, you'll see that. Another thing we could do is use this red film and kind of cover this. And when you're looking at that, you can see how this whole area here is light. You can see it here also, how light that is. So when you take that away, you see that little edge right there? That's going to be your light mask, okay? Everything from here over is going to be shadow mask. So all this is light mask. Within the light mask, there's a highlight, okay? And then so you have that area demonstrated here too. So that's your light mask. The edge in which it turns from light to dark. So you'll see it on this object here, right about there. It's a soft edge. It's called a terminator. That's where it turns from light to dark. You'll also see it right here as well, where it turns from light to dark. So that's going to be referred to as the terminator, that edge in which we transition from light to dark. In this area down here, all of this is going to be the shadow mask, okay? So you'll see me marking that down right here, shadow mask, okay? So again, all this area that is in the dark, okay, technically. And I do have a window open, so let me just kind of close that so you can see even more. That shadow mask over here, I'll probably keep that window closed, okay? So you can see that shadow mask really nicely now. And I'm just showing you that here, okay? And then you're going to have a bounce back light. So right here, where it says reflected light, that's going to be where the light is coming from. In this case, for this make-believe situation, the light's coming from this direction, okay? And it's hitting the tabletop and bouncing back into this bottom side. So it's a secondary light source. You can actually see it applied over here, this reflected light. And you can also see it over here as well, okay? You don't see much of it over here, but you do see some on this left side and some on the right side, okay? That's reflected light. It's a good way to separate the object from this area down here, which is called the cast shadow. So written down there, the cast shadow. And then you can see the cast shadow here as well. Okay, so the cast shadow, just remember that always is determined by the light source, and it's also determined by the object that it's on. So, excuse me. So if you see this area right here, how it's gray, if you're working in painting, you can see how that would make a big difference, because over here, it's going to be more of a brownish color because you've got white versus my tabletop, okay? So just wanted to walk you through some of the light logic. We spoke about before in the subtractive charcoal demo that if you have anything that is cylindrical or spherical, such as this sphere that we drew, or the item we're going to draw, you're going to have a soft terminator, okay? But if you have something that is more mechanical, geometric, you'll have a harder edge. So like, let's just say right here, that transition from the edge of the tape to this front side of the tape is going to be a very hard edge, okay? What I want you to keep in mind with black and white charcoal is not to mix the two, because you have gray paper. There's no point to mix between the black and the white charcoal. Sorry about the sniffling. I'm just looking down, and so my nose is starting to run. All right, so that walks us through that. And then for the cast shadow, the edges that are closer to the object here and here are going to be harder edges. But as it moves away, further away from the object, it gets a little more of a softer edge. We can kind of see that over here applied where this looks like a harder edge. And then as we move over here, it gets to a softer edge as well. Okay, so just wanted to walk you through some of the materials that I'll be using for this demo. I'm going to be using willow packages. Okay, so I'm just using one stick from that package. I'm also going to be using an HB General's charcoal pencil. I'll be using, and that is considered a harder charcoal pencil. I'll be using the General's 2B. It's considered a medium charcoal pencil. I have the General's 4B charcoal pencil, considered a soft. I'm also using the X-Acto knife, and the reason why we use the X-Acto knife is to sharpen the pencils to this bullet tip. So maybe I'll do that in another video, okay? And then once you get that sharpened, you use the sandpaper. So I'll be using this sand paddle pointer, and it has multiple sheets to it. I'll be using a blending stump. I tend to just use one. They come in various sizes. Mine are dirty, I don't clean them. And I'll be using a Tough Stuff eraser, kneaded eraser, and a brush. I'm gonna start off by drawing the shape of my desired object. Now remember, just like if you do a portrait, that initial shape can change. So we always want to start off general to specific. So this is going to be my generalized sketch. Now remember, you're seeing this from looking down, I'm seeing looking at it. So what you're seeing on camera is not exactly what I'm seeing when I'm drawing, okay? And again, you want to have this always to a 90-degree angle to your face. So just like my camera is looking straight down on this, if I'm looking at it, I should have it elevated like this, so I can see it at a 90-degree angle to my picture plane. All right. So I'm seeing in the center over here, kind of like in my subtractive charcoal demo, I had like a bullseye area where the stem came out. I'm going to treat this the exact same way, okay? And then again, I know that usually I don't get it right the first time, so I'm not stressing over it. I want to get this cast shadow in there. Now I know my paper is cutting off some of that cast shadow. I'll just slide that over a little bit to see more of it. And I'm going to treat this as if the cast shadow was all on the white paper. Okay, I'll just scoot that back over. Okay. All right, so we're here, okay? Now what I want to do is map out my shadow mask. So when you say map out the shadow mask, what we're doing is we're looking for the edge in which it goes from light to dark. And again, you can always use this red film that I told you about to try to find that, or you can squint. Squinting is the easiest way to do it because you won't always have that, call it red, like a value finder. You won't always have that with you. So just try to find that ring. All this area up here is going to be considered light mask minus the shadows that are created by all these dents. And then all this area is going to be the shadow mask, okay? I'm going to go ahead and start shading that in. Okay, so with black and white charcoal, you still need to apply your darks and you need to apply your lights. Difference is you don't mix in between because you have the paper. So remember, all this is also going to be shaded, but I don't want to lose my edge. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of outline that a little darker. Keep the willow close together. You don't want to keep it too far apart because if you spread it apart like that, you're going to see all these gaps when you go to smudge it. So you want to keep it pretty close together, okay? Now notice how you'll probably see, I know that my viewpoint, like I mentioned before, is a little different from yours, but you'll probably see how this shadow mask really creeps a little higher than what I've indicated here. Okay, there's a reason for that. Also looking at this cast shadow, I'll go with this bottom one here. And that's why you have the kneaded eraser, which is almost like gum. Actually feels like gum. And then I'm gonna take a piece off of it. I don't like to use a big piece. That way I can mold it in my hand and then go ahead and lift this out. And the best thing about the kneaded eraser is, one, you can lighten things up, but it also doesn't leave all that residue that you have to kind of push off. So that's an added bonus, okay? I'm gonna go ahead and start shading this down. Now, I talked to you at the beginning of this video about core shadow, cast shadow. Core shadow would be that darker area coming through here. Cast shadow would be what I'm drawing right now. Some people think that the cast shadow is always darker than the core shadow. And it's not always the case. I'll give you a scenario while I'm shading this in. If you think about a white sphere on a black tabletop, the cast shadow will be darker, okay? But if you think about a black sphere on a white tabletop, then the core shadow would be darker. So really it just depends on what it is that you're drawing and the value of what it is that you're drawing. I'm gonna go ahead and smudge that in because this is a smaller area, and I smudge opposite of the way I shaded it. So you'll notice I shaded this way. I'm gonna smudge this way or in a circle. Okay, so just using one finger, and I'm not pressing that hard, it's just a little bit of pressure. I wanna be able to take it back out if I, messed up. Just to smooth that down. And you'll notice I'm not crossing over into the cast shadow because I don't want to lose my structure. And this goes with whatever I draw. If it's a portrait and I have, like, let's say this is the bottom of the nose going to that cast shadow on top of the philtrum, which is the dip above the upper lip, I won't shade them together. I'll shade them separated. That way I don't lose my structure because I already drew it out. There's no point to have to redraw. Now some of this powder is building up on my finger, so I'll just kind of touch the back of my other finger. Again, you can use a tissue to do that. And I want to soften out this edge. Well, I'm already at it, so I might as well soften that edge out. Okay. If I need extra powder, I'm just taking that off onto my hand. Okay. I haven't lost my structure, so I'm happy. Okay. Then on this side right here, I need to soften that. Now I feel like I went too high because remember I said the black and the white charcoal should not mix. Once I start to fade this out, I'm going to get pretty close into what I would consider light mask. So I'm actually going to take what I usually would do if I did it right the first time is I would fade this into this top area here. Okay, but you'll notice that I'm putting too much willow in this area. So instead of doing that, I'm going to go ahead and use my, you can say it's Tough Stuff eraser. This is a Factus BM2 General's eraser. And I'm actually going to just take back out some of my shadow mask because I had extended my Terminator even further than I thought I should have. Okay, so I'm just going to take that off. Now you can see all the residue from that. That's why this brush comes in handy. Now, if you don't have a brush like this, okay, you could always use just a paintbrush. This is a paintbrush. Obviously it's dry, but you could use that too to knock that off. This is just way easier. Okay. So just gonna knock all that off. Otherwise, if you use your hand, you're gonna smudge all that willow because willow is highly smudgeable. Okay, so now let's get a little bit more detail into this. So that would be like, let's say step 1 is to sketch it out. Step 2 is to map in my shadow mask using the Terminator and then shade it in, smudge it down, okay? Then step 3, I like to refine it because I already know in the beginning I wasn't absolutely 100% correct. Like that's not a perfectly round. I'm just gonna call it an orange, even though I know it's not an orange. I know that's not a perfectly rounded orange. Okay, so I'm gonna take that off. You can use the kneaded eraser, but that one just helps get it down faster. I'm gonna pull this right into this area right here, and it almost looks like a star in the middle. So I'm trying to break down more so the shapes that I see. Okay. This coming here, thinking about a pumpkin and how this leads to this little part right here. I'm gonna go here. We'll pull this out, bring that down. Oh, it is a star. In the stem in the middle. Okay, so try to break things down simply. Look at the shapes that you see and don't get hung up on what it is you're drawing. That's the biggest mistake that a lot of people make is, especially in portraits, because I draw a lot of people, they get overwhelmed with what it is instead of what it looks like. I'm just trying to edit some of this still here, okay? This is gonna come down. And I've always accepted that my drawing is gonna have an ugly stage. So that stage where you're kind of like, I know you guys all know what I'm talking about, where you wanna just like throw it away and be like, I'm done, you know? But every drawing kind of has that stage. And I think, oh, this is wrong. I think one of the greatest things with an artist is having that patience to work through that ugly stage. I'm gonna edit this up here so that you come out with a piece that you're happy with, really, ultimately. Just kind of think about sculpture when you draw. So it's not so much adding. You want to also think about how you're visibly taking away sometimes, you know, like when I went in here and I took that out, you know, thinking about if that was a block of clay and how, if it was perfectly round, how I could just come in and like take that back out. So if you've ever taken sculpture, that's actually really helpful when it comes to drawing. Okay, so now I'm just trying to, I don't want to say perfect because I'm not looking for perfection, but I'm trying to get a more accurate depiction of what it is I'm drawing. Now, one of the tips I have for you too is look more than you draw. So you want to be able to look, draw, look, draw, look, draw. So you can't see my eyes, but that's essentially what I'm doing. I'm looking at it, drawing a little bit, looking at it, drawing a little bit, looking at it, drawing a little bit. And those two images sync together and become one, and it makes it way easier to draw. Like right now I'm doing that, and I can see how this point should be a little bit here. So I'm going to start to just kind of, you'll see me just kind of editing things around. So I'll come back when I'm done with all this editing. Okay, so now you'll see me blocking in these areas of shadow up in the light mask. Now I'm looking at some of the subtleties that I'm seeing in the light mask. Okay, so I'm going to take out anything that in the light mask that you see where there's either the willow or charcoal. I haven't done any charcoal pencil yet, but if you saw any, you would want to take that out before you apply the white charcoal, because like I said before, we are not mixing the two together, okay? I'm also taking back down some of that shadow mask, okay? And I have an outline over here, so I'm going to, let's see. Okay, so here's the deal. You get to a place right there, and you have two instances. So in this case, for me, let me just knock some of this off, okay? For me, I have, again, I'll call it an orange. I know it's not. The orange in light mask, and then I have the background. Okay, and for me, my background is white. Okay, now we already know that orange is not as light as white. Okay, so you could do one of two things. You could make this lighter than the paper, than your background. Okay, meaning you would add more white here and less here, because there always has to be a juxtaposition of value. You can put more here and then darken up the background, change it all together, make sure like you can make it like it's on black paper. Or you could put white in the background and leave this more of the paper. Does that make sense? Okay, so you're putting more white here, so this would be lighter, this would be darker. Or you put this lighter and this darker. Okay, now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put more white in my background And I'm going to put less light in my orange because I want it to look like it has the value of an orange. Another way to kind of explain this is if I take this and I cover that for you, you can see how the background is lighter than the actual orange itself. Okay, so that's the idea that I'm going for. Now, I'm gonna get out my white charcoal pencil. Okay, mine are like little baby charcoal pencils. They do sell these extenders that you could put your charcoal pencil in, or any pencil really, in it. Excuse me. And then it just adjusts like that. So I'm gonna stick that in there. And this is just a General's white charcoal pencil. It's all dirty and small. And we're just gonna tighten that up. So now we have, see how it doesn't come out? Now we have a white charcoal pencil. Okay, so I don't want to mix my black and my white. So this line right here is probably gonna go away because I don't want to make my orange too dark, and I'm not gonna put darkness in my background. So otherwise I have to get rid of that line. So here's what we're gonna do. We're going to, how do I want to handle this? Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and lighten up this line with the kneaded eraser. So I'm just pressing on it. I can still see it. So I'm not trying to erase it. I'm just lightening it. So you can see how it's still there if you look hard enough. Now I'm gonna go on the opposite side of that and put white. I'm not on top of where I had the original line. I'm on the left side of that, okay, in the background. And I'm gonna go here, almost like I'm outlining the whole thing, okay? Now, again, I don't have a horizon line on my drawing because I'm looking down on this. So that white literally just keeps going. So I wanna make sure that when I do the white, I'm not mixing. So I'm just cleaning up my edges before I go do the white. It's a big thing not to mix, okay? At least I don't. You can do whatever you want, but if you're in my class, don't mix. All right, so we're gonna go here. Now about there, and I'm just kind of looking at that, going to here, yeah, that's good. Then I go to my cast shadow, so I'm gonna actually take this out like that. Okay, so that way I don't lose my construction. And then I'm gonna go ahead and shade some of the background. Now, when I get to the white charcoal pencil, it's keeping the lines close together, similar to how we shade with the willow. And then every once in a while, again, you'll see me rotating this pencil to maintain the sharpness, okay? This one was sharpened with a standard pencil sharpener. You can really sharpen your pencils however you want. I like the bullet tips. Sometimes I'm lazy and I just use standard and, you know, standard pencil sharpener. So I'm actually lightening my background. Now this can go infinite. I don't want to shade all the way. As a matter of fact, you could do a border. If you watch the subtractive charcoal video, you could have a border on here and you could shade all the way to that border. That was just blue painter's tape, or you could use artist tape. But for me, I'm just going to fade this out. So I'm looking for any holes that I've created and just filling in some of those holes. And you can see how in this case, the holder, which I'll call the pencil, is into my palm. And I'm using my pointer finger and my wrist and my arm to kind of move this around. And I'm also hovering, so I'm not touching the paper. Okay, so that's one habit you want to get into doing. Now notice how I switched that. So I was going here, more control, and my palm, like I mentioned. Okay, so I can't knock that out of my hand. If you pull back a little bit and act like it's wobbling, you still have this control, okay, but it's not in the palm of my hand anymore. Do you see that gap? So the way you hold the pencil is going to be super important, okay? So that lightens up my pressure so I can vignette, fade that out into my background. Do you see that happening? Gorgeous. Now what you don't want to do is a halo. So you don't want it to wrap around completely, okay? You want it to kind of spread out so that it has nothing to do with that contour edge. So the contour edge is rounded here. I'm going to just go out and spread that out, okay? And it's kind of like a teeter-totter, so I'm just moving back and forth. Keep that pencil on the paper. Don't lift it up. Okay, now see that hole right there? Fill that in. And fill that one in, okay? So that helps me already see that my orange looks darker than what it is. Okay, so let me go ahead and put here. So as soon as you start putting white around something, it'll really make the object look darker. That's why you don't need willow in here, okay? For charcoal. And I want that cast shadow to pop out too. So this would be considered a hard edge. Notice I'm not mixing them. They're just right next to each other. Again, get this to a spot where you find it to be almost transitioning to the paper. And again, we're not wrapping, it kind of looks like a box shape that I'm doing. A lot of people shy away from doing the background. They wait till the end to do it. I was always taught to do your foreground and your background at the same time, because as you can see now, they clearly influence each other. And even when you're looking in real life, I mean, you cannot help but see white paper and an orange. Like, you cannot disconnect that. So if you can't disconnect it in person, how are you disconnecting it in a drawing? Which means you have to work on them, not literally at the same time, come on now, but at the same time, meaning that if I'm actually drawing an orange, before I even did anything with the orange, I'm actually doing the background. Now, that's not always the case. Sometimes I'll start off with the orange, but for me, I knew that my background was lighter, and I couldn't tell how much white to add into this orange until I started putting my background in. And that will tremendously help, especially if you're drawing something like an orange, tangerine, anything that like cantaloupe, lemon, anything with this like pumice surface. If that's what you're trying to get in your drawing, the background's really going to help, because all the white spots that you're going to end up putting in there, you have to leave the paper, you know, a certain value in order to get that. Now I'm just going to make sure I don't have any willow here. I can kind of see that how it was dirty around that. So if you see anything, take it out. Okay, I'm just using my kneaded eraser to kind of sculpt and get that out before I shade. All right. Now see how it's a box-like form? Okay, that's nice. You can even fade it more. Now, when I get to this spot where I'm like almost to the paper, that's the only time you'll see me smudge my white charcoal pencil. Okay, I will not smudge anywhere in here, because what happens is if you smudge white charcoal into gray paper, guess what happens? Guess, just take a guess, okay? If you smudge white charcoal into gray paper, you're exposing the gray paper. So no longer is it white. You're going to see gray, and we want white. So I don't care about it over here because I want it to fade, okay? Which is why I smudged it. I don't use the blending stumps at all though on the white, okay? I don't have any of them that I can use for my white. Okay, I'm going to put a little dent right in there. Anytime you can kind of maybe exaggerate something, I think that helps the drawing. So you saw me in the beginning how I had that straight. Well, I had it round first, and then I straightened it. Then I came back and I bumped it a little bit. Okay, I try to offset anything that is straight, especially in fruit, because it'll make it look really boring. So I'm going kind of circles. And again, the whole goal for me is to cross hatch. So that's why this whole kind of teeter-tottering is great. Plus I don't get that that problem where, you know, if you shade like this and then you shade here in between, they overlap and it causes that looks like a stitch. Okay? I don't want any of that. So I'm just trying to fill in any holes that I see, change the direction of my line so that my viewer's not like, oh, she shaded that all vertical, or she shaded that all horizontal, whatever. Okay? So I'm going to take this opportunity and sharpen this pencil a little bit, because as you can see, it's getting pretty dull. I would do this on a trash can, but I don't want to reposition my camera. So I'm just going to shave this down. And I would not really want it in a pencil holder. Okay, probably if you have one, take it out. It's a lot easier to do when it's not in a pencil holder. And I'm doing a little bit rotating, a little bit rotating. This is just how I do it. All you artists out there, don't judge me. Okay? Everybody does things differently, so you do you, boo. We're just shaving that down to expose more of the white. This was from my subtractive charcoal demo, in case you're wondering what that was from. Okay, so you'll see how I have that white exposed, okay? Always recap, okay? Now for the sandpaper, you can use a different sheet if you want to. I personally don't. I go right in the same sheet. It's up to you. You can use another sheet if you want to, but I've never have it or had it make any difference. And I'm rotating, okay. So you get a point, okay. Now there's that powder. I'm just gonna knock that. This will be again in a trash can. Knock that into a trash can, okay. And then so I'm just gonna take this away. Okay, and then I have any extra powder, just like in charcoal, just take that out. Like when I did the subtractive charcoal, just take that extra powder off. Now I'm ready to go, okay? And continue shading. Watch out for dirty fingers. So if I'm gonna smudge this, make sure I don't have any charcoal in there. So you wanna clean your fingers before you smudge. Just the outside, not the inside. So I'm getting to this area here, not too sure on my cast shadow, so I'm actually gonna leave that, okay? I'm gonna go right back into my orange here, okay? So again, hover, try not to rest your hand. You can also put a sheet of tracing paper underneath your hand if you want to. Now I'm gonna start in my focal point, and I'm gonna get the highlight here. I'm not pressing too hard. Highlight here. Highlight here. There's a small one there. There's one here. Now, again, I'm not going for like hyperrealism, photorealism, so I'm not looking to capture all these things 100%. Now, if you were, this demo would be way longer than what's intended. So you can do that if you want to, but I'm not. I don't have time for all that. I like to work my black and my white charcoal at the same time. So I'm going to go into, this is the HB charcoal pencil. And I'm going to define some of the things that I'm looking at in here. So I'm going to get in there, go a little darker. It's literally like a line in the middle. And then I'm going to spread some of that value out like a starburst. Okay. Now I don't need to go too white because again, I have that background. And by just using the paper alone, I'm already showing that it's lighter than this, okay? And you can do like a very light layer, but again, you don't want it to compete with the background, which should be lighter. So I'm just doing a very light layer over this, okay? Now, remember that in the beginning I had that outline? Okay, I can take that completely away if you still see it. We can take it completely out because now we have an edge. So that's what I meant by anytime you do a value drawing, there are no outlines, okay? I already have a dark against the light, light against the dark, so we are good to go. Now, if it feels like it's too bumpy because there's no charcoal there, you can edit this now and kind of decrease the amount of bump okay, if you want to. And I want this to kind of pop out, so I'm just going to do kind of circles. I'm going to go back to my charcoal pencil here, get a nice strong line right there, pull it down, okay? And I'll pull some of this value above that line. Let's see if I can zoom in to this a little bit more for you. Again, we're not mixing, so you want to erase out if you find that you're having to put some white down. So I end up holding like multiple things in my hand at the same time. I'll put a little bit more white down here. And I want this one to transition, so I'm going to use the smaller blending stump and just kind of pull this value up. And down. There's not much on this blending stump, so it's not doing much anyways, which is good. Let's see. Now I'm gonna go in with darks and get a coarse shadow. Use this, okay. This really helps me show where I need to put my darks. So I have this up to my face right now. I'm just looking through that. And I'm kind of doing like a speckle effect until I get to my Terminator, which is darker. So you're gonna see me start punching this in. Again, I'm using an HB charcoal pencil right now. I'm going to switch it over to a 2B. HB. Okay, so now I'm down here and I need more of the orange to show, so that's why I didn't finish off the cast shadow, because I'm going to push this line down further. Okay, and because it's willow on willow, it doesn't really matter. So that's why I say be flexible with what it is you're drawing, because it may change. I'm going to scoot this over. Probably have to zoom out a little bit more so you guys can see it again. Stop that from go into my 2B, okay, and I'm going to shade my cast shadow. So I gave myself an edge to follow, and I'm going to shade below that edge, that line, with a 2B. I'm just going to edit some of this cast shadow down. And if you want a softer cast shadow, then I would go ahead and erase right in between. Trying to avoid mixing. And then I'm gonna have, let's see, darker on this side. Okay, don't put any white in your shadow mask. So this is reflected light. Don't put any white there because that's shadow mask. You don't want to do that. Now I'm gonna go ahead and do some speckling. Okay. And then I'm also gonna take the eraser and just kind of spin in the shadow mask. Oops. So I'm just kind of scrubbing at it like that. Okay. Let's see, go to a 2B. Sorry. Then go to white. Now, you'll see me put some white in the shadow mask. It's like, Kalika, why'd you say not to mix it? And here you are. If you put it on top and you don't, like, go back and forth, then that should work. So I'm just kind of laying these spots down. Now when we get to the light area here, I don't want to put too much dark, so I'm actually going to take out some of that willow. And when you can put white next, like I guess white here, this will automatically look darker. So I just took out some of that so I can go ahead and put more white in the light mask and have it look brighter. So try to lose that edge a little bit, soften up some of the edges. Pull the outside to the inside, just to lose some of that edge. So you come into the drawing also. Okay. Let's get some over here. So I'm going to take my eraser, just kind of erase out as if it were like a pumpkin, as I can see that going down. Okay. I'm going to take the blending stump and just kind of pull that higher. Same thing here, we'll pull this here, trying not to mix too much. So now I'm over here and I'm looking at my cast shadow, and I actually want to keep the cast shadow dark down here, but I want to lighten it up over here. So I'm going to take the Tough Stuff eraser and draw out like I'm drawing with a pencil. Now notice I might be losing my contrasted edge there. So I'm actually going to, before I go too far, go with a 2B and pull that value back down so that the object is darker than the background, at least to about here. Okay, so go back with the eraser. Now we're working in the cast shadow. Till about here. And then go back to 2B. Now I'm going to take the blending stump and just kind of soften this out. Again, it's more circular pressure. You can see how much is actually being touched on there. I'm not pressing and scrubbing into it. I'm just kind of pulling the charcoal to my edge without mixing. And you'll see I'm kind of, like I said, moving in circles, and I'm not trying to smudge and compress the whole thing down. I will also find edges to soften here where I can pull into and break up that hard edge. Just soften this one. Knock off some of that. And then if you want, because we're working in a bigger area, you can go to a bigger blending stump. Again, light pressure. Just pull it out. We don't want to overdo that. Okay, just like this is a little rough, so I'm going to go back to my smaller blending stump and soften up some areas, not all areas. Then I'm going to go back to my willow. I'm actually going to reposition this so I can just see the cast shadow a little better. Leave a gap here. Don't go right up to it. Again, we're trying to avoid the halo. So make sure you change directions. When you're going with the edge, you kind of have to follow the edge. That's why a lot of people end up with that wrapping halo around it, but make sure you're just conscious of those things. So now we can kind of finish off this area now that I can see my cast shadow a little better. Again, I'm not going for a hard edge. Over here, we were more of a, hard edge right against the object here. I said leave a gap. Watch your fingers. See the dirt? So you want to clean that off. Okay, then smudge. I'm using like 3 fingers just to smudge the edge. Okay. and then go to an HB charcoal pencil. All right, well, I'm pretty happy with that, so I'm gonna leave it as it is. Put this back in the picture so you can kind of see. Well, that's kind of what I was seeing. Maybe more like that.